So you want to mix some pop vocals, huh? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the crash course on making your pop vocals pop. Even if right now they kind of flop. All with a few mixing secrets, stock plugins, and a lot of honest advice. Strap in and let's stop making our neighbors regret living next to us. First up, let's listen to the pop song demo we'll be working with today, because before you jump into mixing, you need to know what you're dealing with. Is it a ballad? Is it a banger? Understanding the vibe will guide every decision you make.
I want you by me every night, 'cause you make my heart beat loud. Start a party in the lobby.
For this demo, we've got an upbeat, positive vibe, so we'll want to reflect that with our vocals. But before we get into any mixing, we'll have to make sure our vocals are set up properly. Trying to mix a poorly set up vocal is like trying to build a Lego set without any directions. Weirdly hard. The first thing you've got to nail is the recording. Here's a hard truth. No amount of mixing magic is gonna fix a terrible recording. If your vocals sound like they were recorded in a windy alley, you might want to consider a retake. A clean, clear recording is your best starting point. Once you're happy with your raw recording, it's time to talk automation, specifically automating volume. Having consistent volume across your track will help your compressor work more effectively later on. Start by slapping a gain plugin on there and manually adjusting the volume fader for any parts that are too loud or too soft. There are plugins that do this automatically, but I find for the best results, you really need the human touch. You'll be able to really feel what phrases and words need more gain and which ones to emphasize. And it's all about the feelings, bruh. Don't worry about perfection. This is about smoothing out the rough patches so your compressor doesn't have to work overtime. We can always go back and change this later. Now that we've set up our vocal properly, we can begin assembling our pop vocal chain. Or for those out of the loop, the plugins we'll use to make our voice sound money. Let's start off with our friend vocal tuning. For pop songs, tuning is essential. Even the best singers might need a little pitch correction to nail the perfect take. And for the genre we're going for, we've got to add it in. The key here is subtlety. We don't want to notice the tune vocals, but we do want our vocals to color inside the pitch lines. Use a tool like Autotune, Melodyne, or your DAW's built-in correction. My favorite is Melodyne by far, but choose your own adventure here and trust your ears. I like to start with basic corrections in Melodyne and then finish it off with Autotune. Make sure that this is the second plugin after the gain plugin. Now we're onto our sonic scalpel EQ. We'll use this to carve our vocal sound like Michelangelo carving the David. For pop vocals, we'll want to focus on a few key areas: our sub-frequencies, our low mids, our high mids, and our air. For our sub-frequencies, we don't want them competing with our bass line. Most pop mixes are heavily centered in the mid-range anyways, so we don't really need this low-end information. Use a high-pass filter until you start to hear affect the voice, probably around 150 Hz. For our low mids, we'll usually want to get rid of some of that muddiness, especially around that 500 Hz range. I find a lot of low mid buildup that takes away from the clarity of the vocal that happens right there. For pop vocals, we want our vocals to be present. This will depend on the microphone, but we can give our voice a slight boost around 4K, but too much of this and it'll sound harsh, so tread lightly. And then lastly, one of the most important frequencies for modern sounding pop vocals will be this air category right up here. To get that modern sound, we'll boost this high shelf here to taste. Don't be afraid to boost this 6, 8 dBs or whatever your ears tell you. This will add a sheen to the vocal that sounds like a pop record. Here's what our vocals sound like with the EQ on and off.
I wanna go with you to Abu Dhabi, where we can kick it like
Notice the difference? That brings us into compression. This is how you avoid having your vocals pop out like those annoying jump scares in horror movies. This is also a great way to be able to hear every word a singer sings. Here are some general tips. Set your threshold so that it catches the peaks but doesn't squash everything flat. Aim for a ratio that's like a firm handshake, not too limp, not too bone crushing. And then set a quick attack for a sharper, more energetic vocals, a slower for a more smooth, laid back vibe. Experiment with compressor types to add a color to your sound. 1176 types are my favorite. Then use 2 compressors in a row with less intense settings for a better result. We're really looking for every word to come through evenly. To me, compression is the sound of modern music and vocals especially. If you do have any parts that aren't compressed enough, go back to your gain from the first part of the video and adjust it accordingly. Here are the 2 compressors and their settings I used for this vocal.
Abu Dhabi, start a party in the lobby, when it's you and me, we don't need anybody.
Notice how it adds some energy and beef without overly squashing the vocal. You can hear every word, but the passion of the performance is still there. Next up in the basic chain, we have de-essing. For pop vocals, it's almost mandatory. You know all that extra air and presence we boosted in the EQ? Yeah, we also boosted those annoying S sounds as well. So unless you want to sound like a snake every time you hit an S, we'll need a de-esser. Set your de-esser just high enough to catch those sibilant frequencies without making your vocals sound dull. It's a fine line between sibilance and shame. Here's the settings that I use.
Casually tasting the flavors, but I feel the groove and you feel it too. And I can't just say see you later.
Are you liking what you're hearing so far? Smack that subscribe button for more production tidbits and videos like this every week. Let's move on to some advanced processing to add to our pop vocals. Let's make those vocals sit beautifully in the mix with some delay and reverb. Delay can add a sense of rhythm and texture, and it has the added benefit of not muddying up your mix the way a reverb can. I also like to use stereo delays to add width to my vocal. For more upfront vocals, focus on adding depth with delay rather than reverb. Your reverb will add space and depth, making your vocals feel like they're part of a larger environment. The more reverb you add, the more your vocal gets pushed backwards in a mix. Start with a light room-style reverb for a natural sound, and then you can always go bigger from there for more dramatic effects. But remember, less is often more. Here are the settings I use for the delay and reverb on this song, and here's what it sounds like with and without.
Yaddy, 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 I wanna go with you to Abu Dhabi, Dhabi, where we can kick it like cool. Yaddy, 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 when it's you and me, we don't need anybody.
Super subtle, but it's putting it into a space. Now let's add some more sparkle to these vocals with some harmonic excitement. Exciters or saturation plugins can add life to a dull vocal by taking and enhancing upper harmonics, making it more brighter and more present. But be careful, too much excitement can make your vocals harsh. Lightly kiss the track with exciters. Don't make out with it. Listen to how subtle this exciter enhancement is.
Yaddy, 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 I wanna go with you to Abu Dhabi, Dhabi, where we can kick it like cool. Yaddy, yaddy, yaddy.
We've got our vocal sounding pretty good, and honestly, it's ready to ship right now. But for any professional pop vocal, there's always a little more to the vocal story. You can do some really cool things with creative effects to get your voice sounding unique and just, well, sweet. Let me share some of my favorite creative pop vocal effects you can use to add to your mix. First, we have chorus. The chorus effect will add stereo width to your otherwise mono vocal track. You can use a chorus to thicken up your vocals, giving them a more full, more lush sound. This works great for choruses or parts where you want more impact. But too much will lead to phase problems, so be careful. Here's what it sounds like.
With you to Abu Dhabi, Dhabi, where we can kick it like cool. Yaddy, yaddy, yaddy.
Next up, we have flangers. Flangers add an interesting twist to the voice, making them stand out or sit uniquely in a mix. I actually hear slight flanging on a lot of modern pop vocals, but like all good things, moderation is key. Take a listen to the effect to get an idea of the sound.
With you to Abu Dhabi, Dhabi, where we can kick it like cool. Yaddy, 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 when it's you and me.
Now onto one of my absolute favorite techniques for pop vocals. It's called layering. It's one of the best things you can do for your pop voice, and it's to sing multiple takes. I made a whole video on that right up here. If you record yourself singing the same part multiple times, you can pan each take left and right, and you get a crazy cool thick sound. Then you can mix in these layers to taste to add more beef when you need it. You can even EQ and compress these different layers differently based on their role in the song. For example, background vocals might need some more high-end roll-off and heavier compression to sit nicely behind the lead without competing for attention. Check out all of the layers I made on this track. It is one of the reasons why I think it sounds good. I'll play this part with the chorus when we got a lot going on.
Abby, 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 when it's you and me, we don't need anybody. We don't need anybody.
I have doubles, I have octaves, I have harmonies, I have other parts too, including some dums, some hums. You name it, it's in there. And the last creative effect I'll share is the one I hear done the least by amateur producers, but it makes one of the biggest impacts on the final sound. It's automation. You can automate any of the effects we've talked about so far to evolve and change with the song. This gives the vocal an organic, transformative quality that will take it to the next level. For example, you could automate that chorus or flanger plugin to only turn on during the chorus to add some extra oomph. But my favorite thing by far to automate is reverb and delay. If there's a big space with no vocals or I want a cool transition between parts, I'll bump up the reverb automation and let it do its thing. Take a listen to how that might sound.
Keep it tight. We could be living in heaven. Laddie, yaddy, yaddy, I wanna go with you to Abu Dhabi.
Isn't that amazing? You just don't get that without automation, so try it out. And now, after all of those effects, we're ready to mix vocals into our song. Most likely you've been adjusting the vocals as you've added all these effects, but there are some things we can do to help balance it even better. To make things easier while I'm using my vocals, I always like to do them in a completely separate track. You can see vocals add up pretty quickly, and if I had all of this with the original 80 plus tracks I had in this mix, that's a lot of tracks and that's a lot of processing power. Here are some general tips to use to balance the vocal volume with the rest of the song. First of all, use your vocals in a separate track, mixed with your volume turned way down. Your vocals should be audible along with your snare drum peeping through, but only at really low volumes. This will help determine how loud they should be. Mix your vocals last. Many times the last part you mix is the one you're focusing on, so it naturally is higher in volume than some of the others. So for that reason, save your vocals to mix last. Make sure you can hear every word. If you can't, go back to the gain plugin we worked on earlier and change it. People don't listen to pop songs they don't understand. Let's listen to the fully mixed and processed vocal to hear all of the changes we made.
I wanna go with you to Abu Dhabi, Dhabi, where we can kick it like karate, yaddy, yaddy. When it's you and me, we don't need anybody. Yaddy, yaddy, yaddy. I wanna go with you to Abu Dhabi, Dhabi, and start a party in the lobby, yabby, yabby. When it's you and me, we don't need anybody.
Okay, folks, that's a wrap on crafting some amazing and modern pop vocals. Remember, it's okay to mess up. It's part of the game. Screw up, learn, rinse, and repeat. Just keep tweaking it until it sounds right to your ears, or until your neighbors start complimenting you instead of complaining. Did you get something useful out of this? Like the video, subscribe to the channel. There's always more to learn, and I've got plenty of advice that can save you from future audio disasters. Until next time.